Welcome to Face to Face. This is a show about change and about what's next. It's a show that wants to ask questions, peel back the layers of our average everyday experience, and go beyond scratching the surface. We interview amazing people with incredible ideas and stories who have done wild, weird, and wonderful things. Remember that imagination shared creates collaboration, and collaboration creates community, and community inspires social change. I'm David Peck, and this is Face to Face. Welcome to Face to Face, again for another interview on this lovely day here in Toronto, and we're joined by Hoda Elatawi from GAPC, the General Assembly Production Company. Thanks for joining us today, Hoda.
Oh, pleasure to be here, David. Actually, I work, the division I work with under GAPC is GAPC Entertainment, because it's the entertainment arm of the company. So I'm delighted to be here. Yeah,
well, thanks for joining us. And I think it's going to be a pretty interesting interview. Hoda and I have been just chatting a little bit offline about a few things here and there, and I think we've got some pretty interesting and engaging things to talk about. Hoda has been working with GAPC for at least, correct me if I get any of this wrong here, Hoda, but for about 11 years. She's a TV producer. She's made documentary films, been nominated for Gemini Awards. I'm going to let her talk a little bit more about what she does and what she's done and what she hopes to do. And as you all know, a bio will be on the site with a few links to GAPC's website and to links to the new shows. And we're going to be talking about the Prime Radicals and a film that she's involved in. So anyway, let's get right into it. So Hoda, you're a TV producer. Would you say that you are, we talked a little bit about juggling. Tell me how much of a TV producer is actually just another way of saying you're an entrepreneur.
Well, I think the two really equate very well. Absolutely, I'm a TV producer, and I develop and produce concepts in primarily the factual programming genre, meaning, as you put it so well, David, documentaries, docu-soaps, doc-series, across genres like history, science, biographies, that kind of thing, and children's programs. So as a producer, my job is absolutely to be entrepreneurial, which is to sort of read the signs in terms of what television networks are looking for, primarily in Canada and the US, and also internationally. I travel to markets, international markets, as well as throughout North America, to get my finger on the pulse of what networks are looking for, what's hot, what's not anymore, and really try and keep myself educated and informed by watching a lot of television, and doing a lot of reading and meeting with lots of networks to make sure that we're developing ideas, not just that we're passionate about, because of course you can't sell anything that you can't speak to, that doesn't speak to you, or that you're not passionate about, but also that we're developing things that we feel we can get off the ground and sell. So it's all well and good to have an idea that you love, that's close to your heart. And many filmmakers do that, and they do that very well. And it's a hard road to take oftentimes. As a business, we also have a hard road, but we also we have to look very closely at the bottom line in terms of, can we make sure that we can sell this? Will it sell internationally once we've produced it? We're looking at the bottom line. We're looking at what are the costs, to develop something, to get it off the ground and eventually put it on a screen. And of course, as you know, talking many screens now, many platforms. So we're producing not just for television, we're producing across platforms.
To say the industry is in a transition is kind of an understatement, I would imagine.
Oh, I think that's a big one, because I think we're, it's still transitioning, but we're definitely past something that I think producers are involves these multi-level platforms where we are taking our content and presenting it in different ways, making new content, engaging our communities and and interacting with in a way that really, for me, in this business probably for 25 years, is the same but new.
Right.
Always had to produce things that would engage audiences, but as you know, I mean, I'm stating the obvious. We're interacting with them in a much, much different way, and much more vigorous interaction.
Have you ever, you talked a little bit about balancing, sort of the business with the passion and the desire and so on. I was recently at a film at the Lightbox in Toronto, An Act of Killing, a film by Joshua Oppenheimer, a brilliant documentary that probably won't make a whole lot of money, in the scheme of things from a filmmaking perspective. He took, I saw a Q&A with him afterwards, 4 years. He followed these subjects to make this film. I mean, now he's got Werner Herzog and Errol Morris behind him as executive producers, so a little bit of cash there, I would imagine, and just the credibility. Have you ever felt like you've had to sell out because, in a way, to get the business rolling? Do you think that Canadian filmmakers have to do that because we are, we've got such a different industry here than in the U.S., or is that, is that even a fair question?
Well, no, I think it's a fair question, and I'm happy to say, in my opinion, I don't think as Canadian makers of content, whatever the genre or the platform, that we have had to sell out. What's amazing to me is, and as you probably know, is Canadians have a tremendous track record and reputation for documentary filmmaking around the world. And I don't think that's changed. It's harder to get documentaries off the ground. The dollars seem fewer, the doors seem less, but I think that our reputation is right up there. And the other thing that I've realized as I continue to do these international conferences, or markets as we call them, is there's a lot of great Canadian content out there on screens in North America and the US and all over the world. Canadian shows, series in every genre are doing really, really well. We have, you look at a show like Homes on Homes, homegrown out of Toronto, and look at what that show has managed to do, and the reach that it has gotten. So I think that we're doing really well, and I don't think sold out, actually. I think the quality of Canadian productions is right up there. And not just in factual, but in the dramatic or fiction genres, if you will. And I think we're doing really well. I don't think we have sold out. It is difficult, but I think that we have an industry to be really, really proud of.
What is, there seemed to be a time when things really did shift. There was, for years, you had that beachcomber sort of edge to television. Sorry about dating myself there. And now.
Wonderful.
What's that?
That was a very well-loved series.
Oh, it really was, but there was still a feel to it that was very sort of Canadian, I would almost argue. And now today you've got your Rookie Blue, and you've got Flashpoint, and you've got these shows that are being created out of Toronto in studios and so on, that seem to have a huge budget behind them. And sometimes I think, clearly they've got American producers and they're just shooting in Toronto. But really, was there a time when things really shifted and more money was being dumped into the industry, or have you noticed that?
To be honest with you, I'm not sure I can answer that as accurately as I would like. I think that absolutely over the years, we've seen the money grow. And we've seen it shrink. I think it's been sort of a bit status quo in terms of, because as you know, we get funded in a number of different ways, not just from license fees in Canada or pre-sales abroad in the US, but also through something called the Canada Media Fund, which is made up of government funding as well as cable funding. So, we are an industry that is supported with funding. I think it's a struggle, but nevertheless, I think that production is on the increase. When I look at some of the trade magazines, the numbers seem to be growing, which is very positive. Now, is everybody as busy as they'd like to be? Probably not. Definitely in our industry, it's peaks and valleys,
right.
And that has not really changed. From my perspective, in the last 25 years, a lot richer, and there were years that were much, much leaner.
So you're currently making a documentary film. You're working on a few TV series and so on. I'd like to talk about the film in a second. Did you ever make a conscious choice to say, I'm going to produce TV or I'm going to produce film? Or is it kind of you've had to do a little bit of both?
Well, I've had to do a little bit of both, but with with pleasure and with passion, I should add. I mean, I studied journalism, so my initial intent was to be a broadcast journalist and or a foreign correspondent, and I got to meet some great journalists along the way. But I discovered that telling a story in a minute and a half or in that sort of small space of time wasn't enough, and I fell into the production industry a little bit by accident, really, through a friend, as often happens. Somebody talks to someone and you get an opportunity and you take it, and it wasn't necessarily an opportunity that you were going after.
Right.
You think, wow, this is amazing. And so I grew in this industry at the knees of some really terrific writers and directors and crew who had the patience to mentor me through. And I really knew nothing about production in the sense of the kinds of things that I'm doing right now. So I'm not sure if that really answers your question.
No, I think it does. I think it leads into another really nice one too. I mean, you sort of touched on the whole idea of mentorship a little bit, and some of the folks that you've worked with and worked under and alongside and so on. Happy for you to chat about that. In fact, I'd love your thoughts on that. But also, I'm wondering, as a producer, is your job really to find those people? Those same people that mentored you, those same people that you worked alongside that had such an impact? Is that why, when you see a really shitty film, and it's got a great actor or two, and you think the script is okay, but it just didn't seem to work? Is it because the producer didn't do their job?
Well, I think there's a lot of different factors that play, and that's a hard question to answer in a couple of words. There's so many different things. It could be that there wasn't the money, David, to give the film the kinds of bells and whistles that it really needed, or the time that it required to see the script come to life in the way that it should. It could be that perhaps you couldn't hire the caliber of all the on-camera talent that you wanted. It could be the kind of collaboration with the director if they had a different vision. It could be any number of factors. So it's hard to say. I mean, it's and it could come down to just the talent level of the team putting it together. So really, at the end of the day, our jobs as producers is to try as best as we can to put the strongest team together for the particular project that you're trying to get off the ground. The people who are best suited, that have track record, and that you can work with, because it's a little bit like a marriage. Oftentimes, when you start with developing an idea, and by the time you get it financed and produced and in the can, that could be a very long period of time. And so you want to make sure you're working with people that you can collaborate with, that you're not going to have a divorce halfway through.
Right. Well, you used the word collaborate. I think one of the things I so love about the whole filmmaking process and about TV and so on, what little I know about it, I consider myself a bit of a film buff, but I love that community effort. I love the fact that you sit and you watch the credits after a film and you just, there was this many people involved to make this thing? How the heck did it ever get off the ground?
Well, it's amazing, isn't it? But it does, and people do come together, and people come into it at different stages, of course. But you've had a taste of it, obviously, with that wonderful series that we worked together on, called Spells, the children's series. So you had a chance firsthand, hopefully, to experience that kind of collaboration. It was a really, really, I think, fun ride.
I have a wonderful photograph, actually, of us on set, and we're talking about a show that Hoda and I worked on together, Spells, and it was a show about magic and the history of it, and about teaching kids magic and so on. And it's this wonderful shot that kind of is almost wide angle, Hoda, and it's a shot of the camera, and you can see Ron, the director, a profile, and you can see sort of where you're sitting because there's a bottle of water, and you can see, of course, where I'm sitting, but then you get to see the lights and the cameraman and the way the table that Bridget and Jay are working at is tilted up, and you get to see all the details, and yet in the picture framed is the TV screen, the monitor, and you see the final shot, and you go, holy mackerel, look at all the detail here just to get this one wretched shot.
I tell the young people that I work with, because we do make a concerted effort to try and bring interns on and to mentor as best we can, because there's a generation that are coming behind us, and we want our industry to be vibrant and relevant and talented. And so I often tell them,
the devil's in the detail. I mean, sorry to use a cliche, but it's absolutely what you just said. Every little detail matters. Everyone.
So you believe in the little things then?
Absolutely, and it's the little things. And it's also, as a producer, you have to be able to pay attention to the little things, and hopefully have a team that that you can work with, and that you have faith in, that will look after those details. Because at the same time, you have to be able to look at the entire larger picture, both from a business strategy and marketing and creative, working with the scripts, working with the writers, working with the director. And I work much as a creative producer. So what that means really is that oftentimes the concepts, if someone brings me a concept and we look at it and we say, yes, we think that we can sell this, or we develop the concepts ourselves. So as a creative producer, I'm very, very hands-on in terms of the creative evolution of the concept. So I work very closely with the key creative team.
Have you ever found that as a producer, you've had to maintain some level of passion that others have lost throughout a production, whether it's a doc film you've worked on or a TV series? You're out having a smoke with the director, and the director says, "Oh, I'm just done. I'm or out for a coffee, and it just doesn't seem to be working." Has that ever happened before?
Oh, for sure, and that happens. That happens when we're developing ideas and we've put together a team, like a director and a writer that are working with us, really for peanuts or no peanuts,
right.
speculative work, if you will, to try and get something off the ground. And my job is to try and gauge, how long do you spend on something before you decide to give it up? And oftentimes it's like a baby, and you don't really want to give up your baby, but at some point you have to make that decision. And other times, some of the people that you have on your team, or that you hope to have on your team, decide that maybe they can't be in it for the long run, and that's fair enough. So we have to be able to sort of gauge that and make those tough decisions. And sometimes it pays off, and sometimes you think, oh my gosh, I'm just never going to get this thing off the ground, but can I let it go? So that's kind of a little bit, maybe it's a good segue to talk about this documentary that I've been
working. Please. And you just got back from Cairo as well, and there's got to be a connection there to the film that you're making. So please, yeah. Well,
funnily enough, there is really not a connection. Except in a very large way. From an Egypt perspective, all my extended family's there, so we really wanted to go back and visit, and we did our visit just before the June 30th big demonstrations happened. Like we left before those happened. We were worried, about whether or not we would be able to get out once the protests began, because it was hard to gauge. Nobody really had a sense of what the scale would be and what would transpire. So, but it was really, I'm really glad that we were there. It was great to get a sense, on the ground from the people that I know, what they were thinking or feeling, what they were confused about, the big question marks that they had, but really how all the people that I knew were very unified in terms of really wanting to have a change in terms of government. Like there was nobody that I knew in my circle of family and friends that veered from that position. So
I would imagine pretty much everyone you met, you ended up talking about it in some way.
Absolutely. And it's a tough road that that has been taken, but I think that people believe that there really wasn't a choice. And so we watch, and we watch with bated breath, and hope that the media gets it right in terms of the kind of coverage that they give it. And we call back there and check in on everyone, and just hope and pray that we'll see a resolution that ends peacefully and
mm-hmm.
in a way that people want. So.
Do you find in these kinds of situations, Hoda, I mean, this is kind of a once in a lifetime thing, I would imagine, this, what's happening in Egypt currently and so on, but do you find that you kind of wish that you were always recording these conversations as a filmmaker?
Absolutely. That, I was in Cairo it was just before first revolution. And I was there probably about 4 weeks before that. And I mean, of course, I had no idea it was coming. None of my family in Cairo did. And then I went back a year later, post-revolution. So at that time, I did have a small video camera with me, and I did actually record some of the conversations that were happening with my relatives, because everybody had differing political opinions. It was on the cusp of elections. People were excited to be able to have a say in terms of the election process, something that they really hadn't had for 30 years or more. So it was a very exciting time for me to be there, because I hadn't heard my family and friends talk that way really ever before, because there really wasn't any point. Mm-hmm. It was always status quo. So it was a very exciting time to be there. And it was the beginnings. It was like new beginnings, where everybody had expectations and hope, and it was sort of on the cusp of a new dawn, if you will. So right. It was a good time to be there, and I did tape some conversations. But really, what I would have wanted to do was really spend a good couple of years there, right, and document. And I think what would have, there could have been some, and there have been some really great things about the revolution and post-revolution, and I think just that process from before, during, after, and gauging people's expectations before, during, and after, and where they are today, I think would have been a really interesting story arc to follow.
You had said something to me about the film that you are making. I mean, you've been following a family for 5 years, have you not?
Going on 5 years. So, this comes back to your question about, as a producer or, anybody in this business, at what point do you, decide to give up or lose momentum? So I had been, about 5 years ago, I started doing some research and exploring whether or not I could develop a film on multiculturalism in Canada and in Western countries, and sort of really look at what multiculturalism meant. And, was it really the dream that we all think or talked about? And so I knew I had to sort of have some characters, follow some people. But when I talked to networks, they weren't really that interested in it. For them, it was more of a kind of survey documentary. They were much more interested in, at the time, and continue to be, in character-based stories. So in the course of my research, I met a young lawyer who I think at the time was articling. Her name was Muneeza, and we started talking. And when I walked away from that meeting, I thought to myself, "Wow!" I mean, she just blew me away. She was very engaging, and that's kind of where the idea to do the documentary that I'm doing right now came from. And I'd been working on it. I'd been working on it for about 4 years. Raising little bits of money here and there, trying to keep it going, trying to keep my own sense of excitement and momentum going, and the team, of course. And, at times feeling, should I just walk away from it because it's never going to happen? But at the end of the day, we did actually get, we did raise the financing. We're doing it for the documentary channel in Canada. Wow. And we're really excited. But the documentary is called Muneeza in the Middle. And what it does is it explores the question of identity as it relates to second-generation Muslim Canadians. And so my main character, Muneeza, really, I think, exemplifies all the themes that we're going to explore, which is, you have you come to this country, or you have immigrant parents, and they come oftentimes, my own experience. So it's a film close to my own heart. Immigrant parents will come and have a strong sense probably of who they are and what their value system is. And, even if they're in a new place with, that's completely different and value system different, they have these strong ideas inside of themselves because they grew up in their countries. Embedded in them. When they have their own children that are born here, as evidenced by some of the characters in my documentary, there's it's a little bit more difficult. Those kids are straddling, cultural divides,
right?
different value systems, bringing faith into the reality of a Western life, old tradition versus modern Western culture. And so they have to navigate these choppy waters as just kind of figure out who they are. My story really picks up once they grown up and really feel, well, it out. I know who I am. I know where I fit in this world that I live in. And they begin to have their own children. And all of a sudden, some of those identity crises or questions that they had growing up or that they rebelled against come into relief all over again. And I just thought it was really interesting because I see, because I've been following my main character for 4 years through the, before she had children, through the birth of her first child, through the birth of her second child, and to see sort of the shifts and the self-questioning and the asking, do I need to re-identify who I am? Do I need to redefine who I am for my children? Because at the end of the day, for my main character, what's at stake, as she articulates, is her child's fate. And Canadian Muslim Pakistani woman, she grew up, rebelling. And what I really like about my character is she identifies herself as a devout Muslim. She prays, she fasts, holds all those values dear, and they're part of her life. But at the same time, on the outside, optically, she really doesn't fit perhaps that stereotype or what most people would think of a devout Pakistani Muslim Canadian. Visual will immediately fall into our brains. Well, she doesn't fit that visual at all. She wears fitted clothing. She loves makeup. She's a total fashionista. She's got piercings here and there. And it's interesting to watch her try and figure out if she needs to define who she is in order to set her children, her daughter in particular, on what she believes is the right path, and to watch her recognize that she is hearing the parental voices that she heard growing up.
Right, of course, yeah.
Out of her own mouth. And it's an internal struggle. But what I like about the story is that it's very universal, David, because it's about being a parent, and all parents want to do the best they can for their children. So it's universal in that way. It's revelatory in another way because it gives us a very intimate window into a very wonderful, authentic family who's given us access into their world and into their lives and into how they think and where they see that they fit, and into the real struggles that they voice, and the challenges that may occur between, say, Muneeza and her husband, who she realized was maybe more conservative than she understood once they had a girl child.
Right.
And sense of modesty and dress and those kinds of things began to surface.
Hoda, is this a film about how on some level we're just, we're all just trying to get through the day, that we're all just, we're all cut from the same cloth, if you will? It sort of sounds like that to me.
You know what? It's so funny because people, when they ask me what the film is about, and I'll say it is about identity, but I think identity is a very relatable theme to all of us. But at the end of the day, what I realize is that it's a film about how we're the same.
Right.
That's really what it's about. But I think it will open some people's eyes. I think we have a very intimate, lens into a Muslim family, if you will, that will give people hopefully a different understanding of what perhaps they understood or thought of before. So it might might do some myth busting, which is what I'm hoping for. Of course, we continue to, I continue to look at, how the media covers certain things, and the kinds of, Islamophobia still rears its head.
Of course.
Often. And, when horrible things happen, I often say, because I am a Canadian Egyptian Muslim myself, when horrible things happen, the first thing that I often think of is, please don't let it be a Muslim person.
Right. Right.
And it's interesting because I think many of us feel that way. So I'm hoping that this film will open people's eyes in a way. But I think other films have been made and have done that, and I just think we need to continue to do that. And it's a film about how we're all the same.
We need to absolutely need to continue the dialogue, continue the conversation. We need to continue to ask these questions. I mean, I think in some way we all need to be humanized just a little bit more, if that makes sense, whether we're Muslim or Christian or Catholic or atheists or whatever it is. I mean, there's this sense of we misunderstand others, period. And I think that's where our problems and our marriages happen, and our friendships and global issues. I mean, it sounds really, again, tree huggerish, I suppose. I think I used that phrase in an earlier podcast because I'm sounding more and more like a liberal lefty every day, which is totally fine with me. But it's there's this sense of the other. Where did we lose that along the way?
I think you're exactly right. It's in some ways it feels like we're growing farther apart.
Yes.
As people.
Would you say that the idea behind the film has changed in 4 years, or in 5 years? So you had an idea for what you wanted to do with it 5 years ago when you hit the record button. Are you in a different place today?
Oh, for sure. And you know what? It continues evolving, David, because when I started off developing this idea, I was the producer, and I still am. And I was looking to work with writers and directors, mostly directors, to help me shape it. And I worked with a couple in the development stages, and who were fantastic, I might add. But I realized that I was stepping all over them, unfairly to them, actually, because at the end of the day, this was my baby.
Right.
I was vested in it, and I needed to find a way to make it and to shape it myself. So it is an ongoing process. It continues to evolve. I think the core of it remains the same. How I tell the story is developing, and I've got some neat ideas that I won't share with you just at this point because I have to get into the edit suite and try them out.
Right.
Halfway or more than halfway through shooting, filming, and I have a few more interviews that I want to do, and then I'll be hitting the edit suites for a good several months to put the film together.
When are you hoping to release it?
It will be delivered to the documentary channel in April of 2014.
Wow, so that's that's coming like a freight train.
Well, that's it. It's around the corner. And what's really great is I've talked to a couple of U.S. broadcasters who really love the subject matter and who have been watching some of the trailers that I've cut, and really want to be kept posted because they are potentially looking at acquiring the film once it's done. So that would be fantastic. And of course, I hope that the film is strong and good enough and compelling enough that I can get it into some film festivals around the world.
Well, that's fantastic. I wish you well with that. I think it's amazing. I think anything, because of my background working in development and having traveled as much as I have, this whole idea of cross-cultural awareness to me is essential to a better world on so many levels.
And it's not a new area for me. I mean, I've worked before I was doing television. I did a lot of work for different kinds of organizations and associations and even government departments with cross-cultural themes. So it's always been something that's interested me. This is different, one, because it's a film and it's for television, but it's also my directorial debut, if you will. So it's an exhilarating and scary ride.
Yeah, no, that's exciting. Oh man, you're living a life that I want to lead eventually, Hoda. I've had about 4 careers in my life, but I'm telling you, before they lay me in the grave, I'm going to make a documentary film. Damn it!
It's quite extraordinary. So I comes for you.
Yeah, I'll look forward to it. Listen, we're getting close to the end. I hate mathematics. What the heck are you doing making a show about math for kids? I mean, how can that be fun for anyone? I'm going to proudly say on tape and on my podcast here from my millions of listeners, the only test I ever cheated on in high school was a calculus test.
You see, Dave, had the prime radicals when you were growing up, you never would have had to do that cheating. I tell you, hopefully you'll get your kids to tune in. So to answer your question, you're absolutely right. A few years ago, somebody came to me and said, how about doing a series about math for kids? Because, we'd done some children's stuff, including spells. And I said exactly what you said. I said, a math series for kids? Who would watch that? Like, how boring can that be? But I was fortunate enough to meet this extraordinary woman at Queen's University in Kingston. She's a professor there of mathematics. And when we started talking, it was the first time I'd ever heard anyone talk about math in a way that got me excited and where I could visualize math in a real world sense. And her enthusiasm just caught fire with me. And so basically we got together and we talked about the viability of doing something. I went to talk to TVO. They were very into it because it's, they're an educational network. So one of their mandates, of course, is to put out educational content, and mathematics was high on their list. So from there, we developed it. We put together a great team. It's a live action series with 3 main characters. And essentially, it's 2 cousins, Kevin and Alana, and their Uncle Norm. Uncle Norm is this cross between Inspector Clouseau and Maxwell Smart. And he's this zany uncle. They don't really know what his job is, but he has this workshop that they hang out at. And every time they come to visit, there's some problem at hand that he can't really sort out, or that he needs the help of the prime radicals with. And so essentially the kids go out into the real world and they'll talk to different people doing all kinds of things, whether they're firefighters or sculptors or fashion designers or chefs. And through that sort of documentary portion, we see and illustrate to our audience how math is part of the world that they live in. There's an art and craft section. There's a fabulous song at the end of every episode. It's a lot of fun. It's fast moving. The format is short, so we keep their attention. It's like 14 minutes long, and kids really love it. Parents love it. It's parents. They when we were focus testing the series in season 1. Parents would watch it and be astounded by the things that they didn't remember or didn't know. And so there's a lot of wow factor that we try to present in the series. And really the idea behind the series is to empower kids in this. Our demographic is 6 to 8 years old, grades 1, 2, and a little bit of 3. To empower kids to feel good about not just doing math, but to let them know that they're doing it all the time. It's all around them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And to look at the world in a different way, in a mathematical way, if you will, but in a fun and engaging way. So, we're really fortunate. We're launching season 2 on TVO next week. That's September 5th at 6:30. We're hoping lots of people will tune in. And the series has won, up to 7 awards. We just 2 awards for season 2 before it even aired. So we're just delighted. We're going to be launching some apps and games over the next few months to complement the series. They're going to be super fun, and that you can play on different platforms. There'll be a browser version, iOS, Android. So we're really, really excited about it, and I think TVO is thrilled with it. And we're hoping that. Not hoping, it actually is being used in schools. So the show is distributed internationally. It's sold in Asia and the Middle East. It's getting into the schools. Teachers are using it as a resource. And hopefully we'll be able to move forward to a season 3 in the not too long future and continue doing what we think is really good work. I mean, obviously this is work we're passionate about, trying to create good content that has embedded educational curriculum link content is challenging, but it's super fun to do. And when it comes together and it's successful and you see your audience through a focus test or a variety of ways, really enjoying it, there's nothing like it.
Do you remember a movie in the 90s called The Prophecy with Chris Walken? He plays the angel Gabriel, and I remember this one scene because I've never been much of a scientist, really. I mean, I've studied the philosophy of science and so on, but there he was standing on the steps of some house with a bunch of kids around him, and he says, "Study your mathematics, kids. It's the key to the universe." And is that sort of one of the principles behind the show? Would you say?
Well, yes. I mean, big one. And
it's a pretty big metaphysical principle, but still.
Absolutely. And, when we started putting this series together, amongst the research that we were doing and the research that we were getting from Professor Colgan at Queen's University, one of the things that we were seeing was that kids were turning away from math at a younger and younger age, particularly boys. By age 9, we're turning away from math, not good at it, can't do it, too hard. And that was a bit of a surprise for me because, of course, being in the industry as long as I have, and having done educational productions before, there was a time, of course, where we were doing productions that would encourage girls more towards the maths and the sciences. And that pendulum seems to have swung. So it is a bit disconcerting that kids are turning away from the maths, according to the research that we've done, of course. I think math has had a crisis in the last few years, and I think that educators realize that. So if we can do our bit, why not?
Yeah, absolutely. So have you got just as we wrap up, what's next? You've got enough on your plate as it is. You're presenting this doc, in April of 2014. You're probably already imagining the award ceremony. Is it a feature film? What's coming?
Well, we're hoping, as I said, to develop a season 3 with TVO Kids. A number of other educational type productions or concepts that I want to develop, not just for television actually, but for other platforms, for other digital platforms. So I'm really excited about that because I'm exploring sort of new funding models for those. And a couple of what I would call docu-soap or reality type series that we're exploring. We've been cutting some trailers for some of those ideas, concepts that we've been developing. That's all I'll say about them at this point because they're quite new and I haven't really begun pitching them. But let me tell you, if I sell one of them, you'll be one of the first. I'll shout it from the roof. So you'll
Awesome.
definitely.
Fantastic. Well, listen, thanks for joining us on Face to Face today. It's I love your passion, Hoda, and I wish you well with the doc. And we'll be in touch soon. And I'm trying to come up with a tagline for my podcast, and it's going to be connected to. There's just never enough time because I get to the end of my 35 minute interview and I just go, we barely scratched the surface. So again, it goes without saying. So thanks for joining us today, and wish you well with Prime Radicals and the doc, and we'll speak to you again very soon, I'm sure.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure, David. We'll talk soon.